everyone, it's Emily. Today's video is going to be about my most disappointing books of 2017, not to mix it with my worst books of 2017. I will be linking down below because I'm planning 4 different videos: the worst, the best, the most disappointing today, and the most surprising ones. So basically those are books that I had high expectations, that were highly raved about, and I thought I was going to give them like 5 stars and absolutely love them, and unfortunately they just didn't do it for me. Some of them I still gave pretty high ratings for, but there's things that really bothered me and I just wanted to talk about them. So let's go through them because there's 14. So some of them I'm going to be giving like shorter reviews. I'm going to keep them for the end, the ones that I have less opinion. Basically not much to say about those. Let me start with this huge book, which seems to be very popular, and this year there was a movie coming out, so everyone has been reading it, and it is It by Stephen King. And look at this book. It is absolutely huge. With all the good reviews about it, I expected to absolutely love this book, and I have to say, I believe I gave it like 3.5 stars. It wasn't a bad book at all. The first I don't know, like 900 pages, I enjoyed myself. Yes, it's quite long. Some people might be bored by it, but I wasn't. I actually really enjoyed how good Stephen King was at making you feel all those like childhood fears all over again. There's like a bunch of like pretty messed up stuff that happens throughout the book, and I enjoyed it. The reason it didn't end up getting like 4 or 5 stars, for me 3.5 is really good. Anything over 3 is good for me. This is because of the ending. No one can ruin an ending as well as Stephen King, and the ending just wasn't for me. But my main issue was that scene that happens like, I don't know, like 200 pages before the end, which if you don't want to hear any spoiler, when the book is not on the screen anymore, you can come back. But I just really needed to talk about this. And personally, if I had known beforehand, it would have made me like not really want to read the book. So I just want to warn everyone. But basically towards the end, there's a gangbang with 11-year-olds. Yeah, you heard me right. I understand the explanation, like basically kids, you know, leaving childhood and becoming teenagers, I guess, although they're 11. But I never want to read ever again Stephen King explaining the first orgasm of an 11-year-old girl. Like, she's 11. There's like 5 or 6 guys? I can't remember now. That was just so not necessary. So yeah, I was disappointed with this book, and I'm still kind of confused. So I swear, as soon as I got to that scene, I just wanted to DNF the book and be done with it. So I definitely was very disappointed with this book, and I would have a hard time recommending it without mentioning that scene, because then if someone personally told me, oh, I love that book, and I got to that scene, I would be like, why would you do this to me? This book is included in here, and I think a lot of people are expecting it. The book I did end up giving 4 stars, which it probably doesn't deserve it, but I love fantasy, and this is an adult fantasy series, although I'm starting to believe that maybe the audience may be a little younger than adults. The Lightbringer series, the first book being The Black Prism by Brent Weeks, and oh my, did I have issues with this. Let me start by saying that I love the magic system. I think it's fascinating. Basically, people use the light and like colors to use magical powers. Some people can control 1 color, some people can control like 2, maybe 3, and then there's the Black Prism. Basically 1 person can control all of them, and that just sounded fascinating to me. And it was, but my main issue is that no one ever mentioned after giving this 5 stars that this is so freaking sexist. And I'm not even someone that will like constantly nitpick and like, oh, this is sexist, this is sexist. Like sometimes main character is a young boy, which there's one in there, and they'll just be mature and like look at butts and stuff. That's fine. But when it's constant, in my head, it's not world building. Like it's literally the author being sexist. And that's kind of what happened here. It wasn't like 1 or 2 events. I could literally give you long lists. Literally can tell you which character is the prettiest in order. Which one is the best boob? It's also the way characters were described, so it's obviously not just when you're following the young character. The women were described physically, constantly, and the men were described basically their function in the army and stuff. So different. And I understand that some worlds that are being created are going to be sexist. That's just how it is. But when it's not even like mentioned, and it's just like there, makes me believe it's not the world building. Let me mention a few scenes to support my point. Those are all the real descriptions, by the way, from the book. Basically, there's a woman who is 40, and it's we're being told that she's still beautiful and she has pretty nice skin even though she's starting to have wrinkles. Would that ever been said if the character was a man? No, of course not. And at the point, there's a few characters I believe that are naked, and one of the women we're told that she's 40 and has saggy breast. Two things. First off, the guy next to her, does he have saggy balls? No, okay. None of those men were described like physically with anything supposedly negative. And I just overall don't get the obsession about 40-year-old women. What's wrong with you? I did mention that one of the characters was a 15-year-old, like kind of pudgy, insecure, fat boy. And some of the things that happened with him, again, I understand. Some of them are just like, why? During basically the epic battle towards the end, there's two events that I want to mention. The first one, at one point he falls face first into the décolleté of a woman. How inconvenient and necessary. And at the point he falls on his back and he thinks to himself, man, I seem to be spending more time on my back than a whore. Really? I just feel like that type of humor is so cheap, and like that book could have been so great without all of those instances of sexism. It was just not necessary. And I think my main issue, which is going to be the last thing I mention because I could continue, is with the main female character. I feel like this could have been the opportunity to show that, oh, that world is sexist and like, you know, she's battling against that, for example. But the problem is that she is like a badass female character. She's part of the Blackguard, which is basically like the elite, you know, fighting people. And she has strong magical powers. I believe she can control 2 or 3 colors, which is like exceptional. And at one point she is being captured by the enemy, and they force her to wear a skimpy dress, which, of course, and she's stuck wearing it throughout the battle, of course. And she thinks to herself how insecure she is about her manly shoulders. First off, they're not manly, they're muscular. Second of all, I don't know about you guys, but all the women that I know that have like muscular or muscles in general are really proud of them, especially if they work their asses off for them. Just goes to show the author does not know women. Like, personally, I started doing some weightlifting and I have like baby arm muscles and I'm super proud of them. So if someone was to notice them and be like, damn girl, you're starting to be muscular, I would be like, damn right, I've been working really hard for them. It just made no sense to me that that girl worked super hard to like be one of the only women at the top, and basically she's insecure about it. It just... So yeah, basically I had a lot of issues with this. Nobody ever mentioned those, so I just wanted to give like a big review here, but I hope it helped some of you decide if they wanted to read it or not. I'm not saying I'm not going to be continuing, and I just wanted to throw it out there because it did bother me quite a bit, clearly. And I do think it would probably ruin the book for a lot of you. So next, I wanted to mention Artemis by Andy Weir. And I want to start by saying that I think a lot of people will actually be disappointed with this book, and that personally, The Martian is one of my all-time favorite books. So it's not the writing and the humor per se that was my issue. I was so excited when I learned that Andy Weir was coming out with a new book. I realized that I love that premise of someone in space trying to survive only with their scientific skills, which if you have any recommendation, would love it. And no. The main character you're following is Jazz, a 26-year-old woman who is Muslim. And honestly, it kind of felt like the author was just trying to make his book more diverse without actually doing his research. You had to be constantly reminded that she was a 26-year-old woman because she did not read like that, like at all. It was super cringy, constantly bad jokes between characters. I'm not saying some of them weren't good, some of them were, but in general it was just constant, really, again, sexist jokes. And like she would constantly compare things, everything apparently on the moon looks like boobs. And she would be like, oh, it's okay because I'm a girl. Which like, but no girl would think that way, like ever. I always love to remind people of that one scene where she's basically being pursued. People are trying to kill her. She's hiding at her friend's place and she showers there, put on one of his shirts, and the friend comes back in the room and he's a pretty awkward person, which I also want to mention, there's zero chemistry between these people, like none in my opinion. And he's just staring at her awkwardly. And she thinks to herself, and I believe this is the exact quote, I have to admit, I was pretty sexy. I don't know one person, not one girl that would think that way. None. Maybe there's an exception out there now that I've said that out loud, but no. And it was just constant stuff like that. Like at one point, throughout the whole book, actually, there's a character that is trying to develop like reusable condom, and like is trying to force her to be the one testing it because apparently she's a whore. You're always reminded that she's the whore of the town, even though she has a big heart. And I don't even think she slept with one person the whole book. Like there's no mention that she actually deserves that title. And she's also supposed to be a really brilliant woman, and she works as a porter. Basically, she brings packages to people. I don't know. I just, I was so disappointed with this book. I really didn't like it. I believe at first I gave it 3 stars, and I recently reduced it to 2 stars because the more I think about it, the more mad I am at it. So yeah. The next book, I don't have the book with me because I listened to the audiobook, which is my issue with it. But I'm going to be showing the first one, which is Sleeping Giants by Sylvain Neuvel. But the second book, I'll include the picture, is Awaking Gods. And my issue is not with the book. I love this series. I'm not going to mention exactly what happened in the second book because obviously it's the second book. But basically, it's like a sci-fi, very fast-paced kind of mystery thriller-ish book. And a lot of it is told in like interview style or like files and reports. So I thought the audiobook would be a really great way of reading it because it kept being recommended, and mistake. Some people might not have the same issue as me, but I did want to mention it because whenever I finished that book in that like monthly wrap up, I included a clip, which I'll try to include that. I had 2 issues. The first one was the French-Canadian character. The author is French-Canadian, so you would think, although he probably had no say, that they would get the accent right, which they did not. It was just a French accent, which is completely different than a French-Canadian accent, so it kind of annoyed me. People might not care at all, but I did. And my main one is the other character. There's a character who is like a 7-year-old. I think she's from Brazil, so she would have to have a Portuguese accent, which I can't tell if it was a good accent or not, but I believe it wasn't. But she was the whiniest person ever. The character was annoying to begin with, but with that voice, it was horrible. And these 2 characters, like literally there was hours of them together. And I just wanted to throw my phone at the wall. I was so pissed and annoyed.
I got the water part right. We're definitely in the ocean.
I can't see anything.
You're a little freaked out, aren't you?
Can you get us out of here?
I said that in my review, and I'm gonna say it again, but it sounded like a bad porn. It just did. It was horrible. So I'm leaving the book here, but like it's not that one. And the book is good. The second book was good. It's just the audiobook that really disappointed me. Kind of ruined the book for me. I'm still planning on continuing the series, but man, was that bad. Okay, the next one is gonna hurt. Prepare yourself because I think a lot of people are gonna be mad. I mean, realistically, no one should be mad. Nobody tries to spend time reading a book hoping that they're gonna hate it. But I read, actually I do have it, The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. I did read Lord of the Rings, so clearly my issue has nothing to do with his writing. Love that, even though, yeah, there's a lot of description. It's quite long and can be a bit boring. But this was just super boring. I'm so disappointed. I was looking forward to reading this. And I did try to to listen to the audiobook too. It was like the BBC dramatization one that I tried and really didn't like it. And I was so bored. I was really hoping to love this. This is literally my review. I was bored. I was looking forward to this. It's like a classic fantasy book. Yes, it's supposed to be more for children, but like I was hoping to like this and I really didn't. So the next book was recently published and I was really looking forward to it, and it is the Book of Dust series by Philip Pullman, the first book being La Belle Sauvage. And I love Is Dark Materials. I'm actually planning on reading it in January, so it's coming. I'm excited. Love that series growing up. On the bright side, there was some really good scene. It was nice to see the same characters and just seeing the same world. I loved that world. But it kind of felt, which is kind of my issue quite often I feel in YA series, when they're trying to like sometimes stretch the series, it just felt like a prologue. Like 450 pages-ish of prologue. This is just like starting to happen. And I did remember that the first book in the Is Dark Material trilogy was quite long and felt like a prologue once again, the first half before things started to happen. So I kept like pushing myself and be like, oh, I'm sure it's gonna pick up, and it kind of didn't much. I'm still planning on continuing the series, but I just wanted to throw out there that this was pretty disappointing to me. I was expecting more and it just didn't live up to my expectations. So one of the most disappointing books that I've read this year. I do believe I gave it over 3 stars, so it's still a good read, but just I wanted more. The next book is one of those books that I don't think it was a bad book. It just that I had high expectations and they weren't met. And it is, are you ready for this? Steelheart by Brandon Sanderson. I know, Brandon Sanderson is one of my favorite authors. I love fantasy books, and this one is a YA series by him. And I love the idea. Basically, you're following a dystopian world where people started developing not magical powers, but like superhero powers. And there's the superhero, which are actually the villains, and then the normal people. But my main issue was the main character, who, I swear, I don't have anything against 15-year-old boys, but like, you're following someone that's kind of immature and he's like falling in love with someone and it's very cringy. But a lot of my issues too was sometimes, you know, in worlds they will create words, and in there's like 3 different ones which I can't remember. I basically blocked it out. But there's 3 different like swear words, and again, I understand there's, you know, words that are invented, but it's constantly like literally in one page you would have like 3 of them multiple times, and it was just like, I can't deal. And overall I was disappointed because all of his books I ended up giving like 4.5 or 5 stars. Love them, and this one was just a 3.5 stars, I think. I'm still planning on continuing the series. I do have, as you can see, this is my his shelf, and like I have the 2 other ones, so I will be continuing eventually, but I expected to love this as much as I love all of his other books, and this just didn't live up to the hype. Do I think most people would like this? Probably, but it just was disappointing because it wasn't as good as his other books. So the next book is a book that I did really enjoy, but I wanted to mention it because I was disappointed. A Conjuring of Light by V.E. Schwab. V.E. Schwab is also one of my favorite authors, and actually I realized that after reading this book earlier this year, I did not read any of the books by her. Maybe because I was so disappointed. This is a Darker Shade of Magic trilogy, which I really enjoyed the first 2 books, and this I did enjoy still, but the characters were kind of like out of characters. Actually, the main female character in here, instead of, you know, usually characters grow, they can be a bit annoying or something, immature in the first book, and then eventually grow into themselves and just become better. But she became more and more a caricature, and in this book it's really bad. Like, she's literally just a badass. That's all she is, and she's kind of annoying. And in this one you kept following multiple characters, like too many. And I wasn't satisfied with the ending whatsoever. I wanted more, and I'm not saying that everything needs to finish nicely for everyone. I'm perfectly okay with like endings where people don't get everything they need, but this just felt disappointing. I believe she's creating more books in the same universe, which, yes. But the 3rd book kind of left me feeling a bit meh. I still recommend this series, it's just that I expected more for last book. Like, I was dying to read this. The 2nd book, which I feel like people were like about, I gave 5 stars. Like, I loved it. So yeah, disappointed. The rest of the reviews are going to be pretty quick. The first one is Gemina, which is the 2nd book. The first book was Illuminae, which I did like. I actually read the physical book, but it's behind those, so I'm not going to grab it. I did enjoy it, but the 2nd book I listened to the audiobook because, once again, I was told the audiobook was good, which, I mean, yeah, there's multiple voices and there's music and stuff, but it's a book that is really good visually because a lot of the things that are being read are emails, and there's only so many times you can hear like the number of the file or like the email address of the person or the date before you're like, okay, I'm like over it. But my main issue was the fact that it was kind of boring. I was bored, and listening to adults reading kind of cringy, like romantic YA dialogues is really awkward. Like, I was getting secondhand embarrassment, so this is gonna be like, some people might be perfectly okay with it, but I kept being told that the 2nd book was even better than the first one, and I disagree. I'm not planning on continuing the series. I was too bored, so throwing it out there. A pretty much cult favorite on BookTube, which the writing actually reminds me of another book, so if you like that one, you're gonna like the other one, but since I didn't like that one, I didn't like the other one either. Kind of get the pattern here. And I wanted to mention The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern, and this I expected to absolutely love, and I didn't. I was once again a little bit bored. I did enjoy the descriptions. It's beautiful. I do agree that like some of the magic system is kind of interesting. You're following 2 main characters that are basically like trained as they grow up to like, basically at the end they're supposed to have like an epic battle between them. They're like magic and stuff, and never happens. Yeah, it's beautiful, but it just, I don't even need actions, but I need like things to make sense, and like there's not much to say about this. I had high expectations. This didn't live up to my expectations and I was a little bit bored. So, which brings me to this one. This is Uprooted by Naomi Novik. If you liked The Night Circus, you will most likely really like this one. This is a book where it's in a fantasy world. I don't know if it's YA or adult, but it doesn't really matter. And in this world, every 10 years, a girl is taken from a village by the dragon, which, not a spoiler because it's literally happening in the first chapter, and I didn't know when I went into it, which kind of made me disappointed, is that the dragon is actually a man, a very grumpy, negative man. And obviously the main character is chosen to go, and she learns magic, which anyone that learns magic, I'm like, yes, I'm all for it. I want to read you. But obviously there's going to be a love story there, which wasn't really into it. I feel like it was kind of abusive. And the magic system was so boring. And by the way, I never finished it because I was bored. And the magic system is like, ooh, like there's magic happening and things are long and descriptive and I was bored as hell and I just don't get it. I don't even actually love magic systems that are super well described. I feel like people consider Harry Potter magic to be kind of vague, and I'm okay with that. But this was just so like, oh, the feelings of the forest and like metaphors and mythical stuff, and I was so bored. It wasn't for me, but once again, if you like The Night Circus, you will probably like this, but I didn't. Which actually I'm realizing that it's, again, the same thing in here, so I'm discovering things that aren't for me. I was disappointed with this one. This is A Wizard of Artsy by Ursula K. Le Guin, which I love her writing. I only read Laugh of Evan, I think, from her. Really enjoy that one, and I would recommend it. Her vocabulary is way harder for me. Obviously English is not my first language, so I did want to continue reading from her just to improve, and this probably wasn't the best way of doing it. It was again a very vague magic system, and I was bored, and years happened in literally one sentence, and it just... This is supposed to be a YA fantasy once again, and it didn't read that way. But if you liked Uprooted, The Night Circus, you might like this series, but I'm not planning on continuing. I was really bored, and this almost made it to my like worst. Same thing with Uprooted. They were just really bad, but I think I was mostly disappointed more than like thinking this is a horrible book. So just really wasn't for me. Magic system and the overall story was just boring to me. I think the next one is the last one, and this one I was expecting to love this. There's a movie on it, and I was told that the book was very different, but even better. I'm talking about World War Z by Max Brooks. And this is basically interviews of an oral history of zombie war. So basically interviews from people that survived zombie apocalypse. And I do think I might give this a shot as an audiobook. That might be better. But again, I was kind of bored, which really sucks because I love like apocalyptic books, and I love the movie, and even though they're different, I expected to love this, but I didn't. So if you like war books, you will probably like this. It's usually not my jam unless they're like magic or something, but yeah, disappointment is like the right word. So disappointing. There's one more actually. I wanted to mention Down Among the Sticks and Bones by Shannon McGuire. I read the first book, loved it, read the second book. It just was disappointing to me. I think some people will absolutely love it. Actually, I know some people absolutely love it, but you're following some of the characters that were mentioned in the first book, and that world is just not the world I was interested in learning more from. So I am planning on continuing and reading the third book in the series. I don't know if it's a trilogy, but I'm planning on continuing. It's just that world, those two characters, the twins, I just wasn't feeling it. So kind of boring. I was just disappointed and a little bit bored. So I think those are all the books I wanted to mention. I know it's quite a few books, but I did read over 120 books this year, so of course some of them will be disappointing and not live up to my expectations. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Once again, I will be linking all the related videos that I'm posting once they're up. Don't forget to give this one a big thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe to not miss any future videos, and I will be linking on the screen other relevant videos that I highly recommend you check out, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!